Okay, so here we have a course grid that we are dynamically rendering from hitting a server service, and it comes back with an array of courses, and we're rendering as a card, a deck of cards, right, in a grid layout. So what we'd like to be able to do now is maybe click on one of these and navigate to a course viewer, right, that renders the course for the students to be able to consume and take a look at that course, right? So let's see. Let's see. So let's take a look at what we'd like to be able to do is now create another component and like to be able to navigate to that component, right? So let's build being able to navigate between Angular components, right? So how do we do that? So what we need to do is configure the routes, right, and say that we for each one of the URLs, right, we would like to be able to show a different component, right? Very much like we did in React, right, where you declare routes and links, right, and then you configure what component did you want to display depending on what path it saw on the URL. Yes, it's somewhat similar to that. So to do this, we're going to import a couple of modules that implement this behavior. It is the routes and router module, right? That are part of the core Angular set of libraries. And we want to configure the whiteboard component as our default, right? The very top level where you want to navigate from. Okay. So we'll give it we'll make it the default. And we'll say if the path has nothing on it, what we're going to do is that we're going to redirect to a home path, right? And the home path will be our whiteboard component, right? And we'll have a default. These are declared in order, right? They're parsed from top to bottom, right? And the first one that matches, right, it will go and go ahead and navigate to that, right? So if it doesn't see anything, it'll direct to home. If it sees home, it'll go to home, right? Which is the whiteboard. Anything else, if you type anything else, right, it'll just go to the whiteboard component. Right? If you just type any garbage there, right, it'll also go to the whiteboard component. It'll be our default place, right, to be. Okay, and we're going to export this as a routing class, right, that extends routes, right, and it's of type routes. And then we're gonna declare it. We're going to import it into our configuration file. So let's implement this file in app.routing.ts. So here we'll implement file app.routing.ts, and in there let's just copy this and let's paste it in there. Right. So right now it's we're just configuring our starting point, right, our whiteboard. But certainly we will be adding many more paths here if we want to navigate to courses and lessons and whatnot. We'll be adding those as we go. All right, so let's now load it into our modules. So in our modules, we're going to import that routing. There it is. I noticed that it imported from app routing. So we're ready to go. The next thing is that that component, we're now displaying the whiteboard all the time, right? This is the whiteboard that's at the top level. Right? This says the app component, that's our root component that is loading our whiteboard component, right? So it's always showing our whiteboard component. But what we want to do is say, well, you want to be able to navigate from one place to the other, right? And we need to tell it where to put the things that are dynamically loaded, right? That as content gets loaded dynamically, it should render it where. So we need to tell it where. We could do it here and say, well, we're going to replace this content with whatever content we want, or we could do it here as well in the whiteboard here, we can put here a, actually no, let's do it here. We could put a placeholder here that says, I want you to fill in the content as you navigate, right? So this will be router outlets. So router outlets is a placeholder that says, okay, this is an empty div, right? And I'm going to dynamically inject content here depending on the route. If the route says home, what am I going to render there? Well, home says to render the whiteboard component, right? Instead, if it says /cores/CS5610, well, that path will say, oh, well, that means you're going to be injecting there the content for course 5610. Yes? Right? So this is going to be our place where we're going to inject all our content. Okay? All right. If we go back, notice that it already looked at home. It says that that's our base location, right? That's our default. Notice that if I remove it, right, it automatically redirects me to home, right? And if I type any other garbage, it says, yeah, that is still your base where I'm going to redirect you. Okay, and that's why we put that ** as the last one. That's kind of our default. If none of the other paths match, then this is the one that's going to catch all, right? It brings you here. All right, so what we'd like to be able to do is that when we click on one of these buttons, we would like to navigate to a course viewer, right? That shows the content of that course. Okay. So we'll need to create a course viewer component, right, that we can navigate to. So let's do that. So let's see. Let's here. We're going to generate a course viewer. So we'll create a course viewer, and we'll navigate to the course viewer when we click on one of these buttons. Right? I'd like to navigate there. So let's do that. Let's see. We have the course viewer somewhere here. We created, there it is, and the HTML there. We'll say that is H2, and this is a course viewer. Okay, for now, right? And what we're going to configure is that in our routes we can say, well, if you navigate to some URL that starts with /course/some ID, right? Then I want to navigate to that particular component. Right? So we'll say that, for instance, we can say if the path has the following pattern of starts with course, right, followed by something that I'm going to name as course ID, I would like to navigate to the following component, which is our course viewer component. There it is, the one we just created, and a comma at the end. Okay, right? Meaning that if I now type course /1, right, it navigates to course viewer. Right? Anything else, any gibberish, if it doesn't match, it'll always go default to a whiteboard component. Make sense? Right? So the interesting part would be that if I navigate to course 1 or 2 or 3, is that I would load the content for that particular course and display it here. Okay? So let's take a look at how to do that. So first of all, we need to configure all these URLs. Notice that all these URLs, all these links of go somewhere, notice that they're mapped to just hash. So they're not mapped to really anything, right? We'd like to map it to something that says /course/ and then the ID of the course, or 2 or 3 or 4, right? So let's do that in the whiteboard, in the course grid. That's where we're rendering all of these, right? Here are the hyperlinks that have hash. So what we're going to do here is that we can either build it by hand /course and so on and so forth, or better yet, there's an attribute, there's a directive that handles this, which is the router link attribute. Okay, and this is better in that here this would take as argument a URL. Okay, and that URL is dynamic. It's going to be a dynamic URL, and it also needs to be parsed, right? Because what I'm going to be using here are, for instance, some data here that is going to be used later as part of the path, and somebody else is going to want to parse those path elements, right? Like the course ID, I want to be able to parse it so that I can go and fetch that particular piece of data. Yes. So the pattern is course followed by the ID of the course, right? And that is part of the course object that we're iterating over, right? So here's course.id. So I am inlining, right, the value of whatever the course is, the ID of the course is, and whatever that value is, I'm replacing it and dynamically rendering, generating a URL on the fly, right? So that if I now navigate and I hover over these, notice that instead of having the hash, right, it has course/1, right? If I hover over any of these, right, it has course/2 and 3 and 4 and whatever the ID is in the database, right? So that if I click on any of these, notice that it navigates to course viewer, but now notice that we have /1 or 2 or 3 at the end, right? So we could use that to load that particular course content for this one course viewer. Okay. So that's the part. What we'd like to be able to do is when we navigate to the course viewer, where is it? In the course viewer, there it is. What I'd like to be able to do in the course viewer, let's first put some container around this. This is container fluid. In the component, what I'd like to be able to do is listen for that incoming ID. Right, we need to parse it from that ID. And so the way we do that is that we're going to do that in the constructor. Right, when this gets built, right, we're going to listen for any changes in the URL. Right, if that URL changes at any moment, we want to be notified. Right, so we're going to be registering an event handler on that URL. If it changes, reinstantiate me. Right, reload. Right, reload whatever I based on that URL. Okay, so to do that, we're going to be declaring here we're going to be injecting a service that does exactly that. Just like we can have services that go out to a server, and services that can interact maybe with a GPS, services that can do all sorts of asynchronous things. There is a specific service, right, that can listen for changes in the URL. Right? And that service, we're going to call it a route, and it's called activated. No, it's of type. Sorry, route is going to be of type. Activated route. There it is. So activated route is a listener, right? Listens for changes in the URL, and we want to subscribe to that, right? So that if it changes, we want to be notified, right? And so the way we do that, we can say, hey route. There are several things in there. The route has all sorts of things. It has the actual IP address. It could change, right? The port could change, right? The query strength could change, right? The path variables could change. So you can subscribe to all sorts of pieces of information. We're going to subscribe to changes in the parameters, right? In the path. The path, in this particular case, has quite a few parameters. Well, in this case, it has only one parameter, the course ID. Right? The path has only that one parameter, but it could have a whole bunch of other parameters, right? This could be course ID, module ID, lesson ID, topic ID, and so on and so forth. Okay, well, lots and lots of parameters, but right now we only have one. So we're subscribing to the parameters, and if anything changes in the parameters, we'd like to be notified. And when the parameters change, it'll pass us an argument. It'll pass us and say, hey, here are the parameters. They changed. There they go. Yeah, there you go. Here they are, right? there's our params as an argument. And what we're going to do for now, we're just going to print it out to the console to see what they are. Okay? All right, so if we go and look at the console, we inspect and look at the console here, and we refresh. Notice that it has as parameter the course ID. That's what we called it in the routing, right? We called it course ID. That's why I chose course ID. And it parses by place, right? By placeholder, that 1. So the value of 1 is course ID 1. Make sense? Right, if I would have navigated elsewhere, it would have been course ID 2. Right? And if there were more parameters, it would have parsed them and let us know in here. Everybody okay? All right. So what can we do with it? Well, one of the things that we'd like to be able to do is load the course for that ID. Yes? So let's pass it along to a function that can do that. Maybe we'll call it, there's a local load course, and it takes as argument the course ID. Yes? And we can pass it along. We can say, pass it to this dot load course ID, and we will pass params, not all the params. We could pass that one parameter, course ID. Right? It's a map. Right? It's a JSON map, and we're passing that one value. And the course ID can do console log, certainly can do course ID. Right? So notice that it just prints 2. Right? If it changes, right, it just changes to 4. Yes? Right? So now what we'd like to be able to do is go fetch that course now that we have the ID. Okay? So to do that, we'll have to declare it in the service. In the service, we'd like to be able to go fetch it. We have a service dedicated to dealing with course-related data. Yes? Right, so we have on the service, we have our course service client. Any data access would have to go through here. Right? So let's do that. So here we'll declare find course by ID. And take as argument a course ID. And this will return fetch. It'll have the same course URL. Plus, it will pass along the ID of the course. Yes? Right? And this all assumes, obviously, that there's a service that responds to this, and we've looked at that implemented in Java, right? And this responds the same thing, right? So this response just response.json. Right, now that we have that service elements, we can from the component, we can just load it here. We can load it and say we need that service. We don't have it here, so let's bring in that service too. So the private service is of type course. What was it? Course service client. There it is. And we're just going to say we're going to load it, and we're going to store it in a local array of, well, no, not an array. It's one course, right? So of type, course is of type course, and has a value of new course. Let's load that. And this is going to fetch that one course. So we're going to say this.service find that one course. I have the ID. There's the ID. And when it comes back, when the course comes back, I would like to assign it to my course, my local course. Yes? Right? Now that we have it inside of the component, right, the templates can read it, right? Because the template and the component have a one-to-one relationship, right? So we can, in the templates, instead of course viewer, we can maybe we can render the actual course title. Right. So now we have the actual title of the course. If we go back and we go to another course, notice that it's 5610 or 4550. Right. It's the title of that course, fetched from the server. Right. The client is not the previous page is not passing anything other than the ID. Right. All right. All right, so now that we have that we would like to fetch all the other things that are related to a course, like the module, lessons, and all those kinds of other things, right? So let's take a look at that next.